Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Marcy Markusa, and on our podcast today, we have a rare look for you inside one of Winnipeg's emergency departments. This is Manitoba. And not only any emergency departments, the one at the Health Sciences Centre. So you know that the HSC is Manitoba's largest healthcare facility, and it has been an extraordinary year there. A man died in the ER while waiting for care in January. There was a code orange call that very same month because of a blizzard. Well, now a nurse who has worked in the ER at HSC for decades is speaking out about the challenges that healthcare workers are facing. She says most days it's, quote, chaos. She does point to the 2018 closure of 3 ERs as one of the biggest issues in the city, though she believes our system has been broken for most of her long career. I spoke with her recently for over an hour. CBC News has concealed her identity to safeguard her job. Today, in the interview, we will get access to one of Manitoba's busiest emergency rooms in the province, as we mentioned, but it also might help us understand more about what frontline workers in our province are facing. Here now is our interview. So when the waiting room itself is busy, and this is where I think a lot of Manitobans kind of, that's the entry point, right? Everybody can imagine what that looks like. But what's the actual system for how people are checked while they are waiting? Like what are those positions like in an average shift at HSC ER?
So we have 4 triage nurses. We have 1 nurse that's assigned to what's called offload. And we have what's called a community services worker. She or he is probably the eyes and ears of the waiting room. If they're concerned about somebody, they come to us. I mean, we work really closely with them, trying to figure out, what's going on with all the people that are waiting. But those are the people that talk to them every 5 minutes or hour or half an hour, the ones that people come to for help. They'll come to them and then they'll come and say, hey, can you come and see this patient? I'm kind of worried about them, or bring them up to the desk or whatever.
What would lead to someone getting missed on a busy night when there's lots of people there?
Just chaos, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, 2 people could be fighting over there. I mean, we have quite a few security guards in the waiting room, but people get angry at each other and the patients themselves are fighting amongst. Just in a bad day with lots of things happening, that seems to be when the worst of the chaos happens. And the reality is, at bad times, there could be 60 people out there. And well, that's just in the waiting room part, and then maybe 12 or 15 down the ambulance hallway.
So I want to ask you about, I know you weren't there that shift, but the night that the man died in the HSC ER, what is that like for you?
It's, I guess we talk about it like we're lucky that it doesn't happen every day, because it's chaos, it's craziness. There's people that are in our department and they step outside and they use drugs and they come back and they're not breathing. I bet you once a shift I'm pulling somebody out of the waiting room to give them Narcan because they're not breathing anymore because of the drugs they took. It's very grating on your soul. It's difficult to watch. It's difficult to be part of. I don't know how else to describe it.
We don't, I should be clear just so people listening and viewing this, so obviously it's under investigation and we don't have details about what happened specifically in that case. But given the environment and you saying that you're lucky that you don't have some kind of a death once a day is really, that's sobering.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the person who lost his life and, the one that happened all those years ago as well, that was in 2008.
Brian Sinclair, yes.
It's a broken system, and it's been broken for the majority of my nursing career, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure that there's a quick fix to healthcare.
When you agreed to speak with us, you said you want to be a strong voice for your work family, that you're really drowning, and that you need help. What questions should we be asking people in power that are making the decisions to improve our healthcare system right now?
I'd like to know what the plan is. I mean, they tell us that they're hiring more staff and opening more spaces, and I mean, they opened a contingency ward the other day when I think we had 43 admitted patients, and in 6 hours that ward was full. And we're still in the same situation as we were 6 hours ago. There's still no beds for these people that are in our department. And it's like every day they admit X number of patients, but they're not discharging that same number. So it doesn't equal. The admissions is far outweighing the discharges.
And what about people who are experiencing, like have come in with a stroke? Because I know you were sharing that can be a particular challenge.
A lot of people that have strokes, they're maybe subacute strokes or they're smaller. Their functioning level is less, so they can't go home, but they're not sick enough to be admitted to HSC. So they get flagged as the low acuity, the alternate level of care, and they sit and emerge sometimes up to 12 days, even longer, waiting for a site or a bed at the low acuity site.
How much of an issue is that then? Because I think the average person thinks, well, if you have a stroke, but it's, lower issue and someone's stabilized, move them on. But you're saying there's nowhere to move them on to, so they're stuck. So part of this is that the emergency department is now
a holding zone. Personal care home, it feels like some days.
What's the longest length of stay in recent memory you've had somebody that was in a bed like that, recovering from stroke?
We had 310 hours the other day. That's probably the longest I remember in the last month. 310 hours in emerge.
A patient was there for that long. What prevents someone from going up to a ward?
It's full everywhere in the province.
Where is it empty? Because some of the wards, I understand, they're actually shuttered because there's no people?
There's no staff. There are some wings in the hospital that are unoccupied because there is not enough staff.
I know that you weren't there the night that the man had died in the waiting room at the ER, but you were there recently on shift during the recent blizzard and the code orange that was called. What was that like?
Magical. I mean, thankfully we didn't receive any patients that day, but it was so, I don't know what the word is. I was so inspired by the teamwork that I saw, by the people that were coming and taking the patients, and we had so many social workers and transport, like everybody just came to help. We emptied out our department so we could take the new patients that may or may not be coming, and that day we never received any patients from any of the accidents that had occurred. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured enough to come to us.
So something happened to clear out the ER that day. Obviously, it was a very specific thing, a code orange, but something worked.
Yeah, it was magical. I don't know. I mean, watching it, it was just like, wow, I'm impressed. Now, can we do this every day? Can we call a code orange every morning? I think it would lose its magic if that happened.
Where did all the people go, though?
I don't know. It was just, some were discharged from our department, the people that were safe to discharge, but they just pulled them up. And I don't know if they pulled them in beds that were closed because they didn't have staff for those beds or what had happened, but it was like, wow, where did everybody go?
Did they come back after then,
No.
some of the patients?
None of them. We didn't get any of those patients from the accidents, and the ones that moved out of our department, they stayed out. They never came back.
What was one of your worst days on your job?
I don't know. Maybe I remember a Wednesday in November. I was at Triage. I think there was only 3 of us. Usually there's 4, sometimes there's 5. We were short-staffed. It was full. And it's just difficult when there's lots of misbehaving in the waiting room, and people, whether they're drinking in the waiting room or doing drugs in the bathroom in the waiting room, or it was just chaos. It was just the whole shift. I don't think the three of us, I don't think any of us had a break that night at the triage desk. We never left. It was 12 solid hours of chaos.
Is it silly that I'm surprised that people would be drinking in the waiting room and doing drugs in the bathroom, that you're having to deal with that? Is that unusual?
No, not for us. I mean, that sounds horrible, but it's a daily occurrence, probably. The drugs and alcohol, that's huge for us. It really is. I mean, there's a couple patients that when I watch them walk through the door, I say to security, put the hand sanitizer behind the desk, please. Because I know that if it isn't, they're going to take it. Like, that sounds horrible too, but drinking, drugs, addictions.
They're drinking the sanitizer. That's why you're saying that, yeah.
Yeah, well, so, you triage somebody that maybe is intoxicated, and then at triage you decide to do blood work, and then 3 hours later you find the person in the corner sleeping, very strong sleeping, and then you do more blood work and the alcohol level is double what it was when they came in. And it's, I don't know, we're a safe space, right? It's frustrating, but it's all they have. And
what do you need? We're talking about systems and departments and governments and, solutions and problems, but what do you need?
If we could have 5 more nurses every shift, if we could even have our baseline every shift, most shifts were supposed to be charging 25. Most shifts were not there. I mean, 21, 22. But if we could have 25 or 28 every day, that'd be really nice. And if we could have an infinite number of unit assistants to help, they're amazing people too, but it's just, there's so many people and so many people need so much stuff, help, whether, toileting or changing the linens or more hands make less work. That's one of my mottos. More hands make less work. It's exhausting. I don't know. I had a Sunday morning. It was so frustrating. There was 47 people in the waiting room, and the other sites had, I think St. B had 3 and the Grace had 7 or something like that. And we had 47 people in our waiting room, and a young man hung himself in the bathroom, and the housekeeper found him, and nobody ever knew about it because he didn't die. We resuscitated him, we intubated him, he went to ICU, and he ended up fine a couple days later, got extubated, went home with his family. But nobody heard about that because he didn't die. I suppose had he died, it would have made news. But I was so, frustrated that morning because we were packed and the other places were empty and they just kept coming. The ambulances just kept coming. And it was like, could you take someone somewhere else? Like, it's so frustrating, but I mean, I don't blame the paramedics. They're angels too. Their job is to get people to the care that they need. And unfortunately, I think all roads lead to HSC.
How often are you seeing people in the ER that are there because they're experiencing homelessness?
More so at the night shift. I think there's more places during the day that people can stay warm.
But every shift?
Every shift. Every shift.
How many people?
10, 15. Same people every night.
You know them?
I know them. I know their names. I know their birthdays. Some of them I know their personal health information number off by heart because that's how many times I've seen them.
So now you are a shelter worker, an ER nurse, a person who's involved in, as you put it, a holding area for those that should be in care homes, maybe.
I'm a lot of things. We all are in Emerge. Once they get triaged, a doctor has to see them, or they have to be medically cleared to go to those warm-up shelters. We can't just send them there from triage. Even if we know that they're just there because it's cold, we still have to have them seen by a physician to say that they're stable to go to that shelter. Because they presented to us, they didn't just go to the shelter. I mean, and I'm not sure how to get the word out that there's shelters that they could go to. They don't have to come to Emerge, but it's just habit for them, I think. And they're safe, and we feed them, and we're kind.
Who's most commonly sitting out there? Like, what's the ratio? Are you going to have half the waiting room full of people who are unhoused and the other half who are having maybe more, for lack of a better term, traditional medical emergency physically, or is that way off? You know what I mean, that ratio? Is it?
Sometimes it's like half, sometimes it's like 3/4 of the unhoused and
much?
Yeah. Some nights there's 30 people at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 people in the waiting room, and 4 of them actually have medical problems. And the rest are just there because it's cold.
And when did that number start to shift like that? Because that wouldn't have been...
It differs every day, so it's not really like a set number.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean, it's an average. Sometimes we look and go, oh, we don't have any patients. They're all just here for shelter now. We got everybody else in. It just depends on the night and how busy it is and what's going on within the rest of the department. But
got it.
At triage, sometimes all of the people that are left in the waiting room are seeking shelter, seeking warmth, seeking food. I mean, not that we're not here to help the unhoused, but there's a whole group of people that are paid to do that, the shelter people, the people that are at the warm-up places. If you don't have a medical problem, you shouldn't be in an emergency room. I mean, mental health crisis definitely counts as a medical problem. A drug addiction counts as a medical problem. But if it's cold outside and you don't have anywhere to go, that isn't an emergency. That needs to go to a shelter, not an emergency room or an urgent care. Because I think they're getting overrun with the people, the unhoused population too, especially in this cold snap, right?
How much do you wish you had someone there that you could, like, you said you have a social worker, I think you called them an angel, but they can't take someone.
No, but I wish we could have a bus out front, a warm place. Go sit in that bus, and when the bus is full, they'll take you to the shelter.
I know that you had said that when you agreed to speak with us, that part of it was because you wanted to be a strong voice, you said, for your work family, that you really are drowning and that you need help. I wonder what questions that you think that we should be asking people that are seeking people in power. What questions should we be asking them?
It's really hard to describe the world that I live in. It's really hard, the chaos, there's a person over there who's screaming about, his shoe was lost and he's on meth and he needs some food and he's yelling and screaming. And then there's a little tiny old lady over here who has a fever and she has cancer. So she's like a C-test too, needs to go in. And it's just the craziness of everything that's going on. It's hard to describe. I actually would like our premier to come, or our Minister of Health, just to come and see. Come and spend a day. Shadow me for 8 hours. That would be an open invitation.
So that is my conversation with the nurse from HSC who's been there for some decades and works in the emergency department. I just want to share one more quote from her. I know you just heard the full interview, our edited version of our hour-long conversation, but she also said, quote, "We're the province's hospital. And it's really sad what's going on in our department. The length of stay, the wait it takes to see a doctor, it's not great. It needs to be better. We need to do better. And I don't know how to do that," she said. "We need help from the people above us, the decision makers. Something needs to change for us to do our jobs properly," end quote. I want to thank the nurse for trusting CBC with her story. And I do want to mention also that the next time that we have the Premier on the podcast, we certainly will put some of the questions that came out of our interview with the nurse to him. I'm Marcy Markusa. This is Manitoba. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and share.